I was contemplating what everybody was saying about, biblical womanhood, and I didn't want to just turn to Proverbs 31 and depress us all, and so I wanted to think of a different way to deal with the topic and yet, give a good coverage of the information. So I got to thinking about different women in the Bible and what their lives had to offer us as far as examples and some good examples. I'm not going to deal with the bad examples. We're going to be positive today, I think. But anyway, so in the first session, I'm just going to focus on one, and in the second session, I'll discuss 4 different women. And the first woman is Rebecca. Now, that's not just because that's my name, but I think there's so much information we can learn from her throughout her life, and just how she shows us that obedience will put us in a position to hear from God and for him to use us. And I think that that's what all of us want here, to be able to be used by God. And in order to do that, we need to be in the position to receive the word from him on how to serve him and also be blessed by him. So as we study Rebecca, we find her appearing in Genesis chapter 24. And today, I don't know that you'll receive much new information from me, but this is always a time to just share and remind ourselves of things that we already know, that we forget during the times of busyness and everything. So this is just for sharing, encouraging one another, and I may get to hear some information from you today too. So this is very informal, and I look forward to all of us sharing in it. So the narrative begins, like I said, in Genesis chapter 24, and Abraham is nearing the end of his life, and he's concerned about Isaac, who is not yet married, and Isaac is 40 years old. And so for those of us who still have unmarried children, there's hope. I hope my kids don't see this. Anyway, so he's dying, and he sends his servant to find a wife for Isaac. And I think it's really important to notice that he does not want Isaac to marry from the people that they are living amongst, which is the Canaanites. He wants him to marry someone from their own family. And I think that's something that we can learn from, in that perhaps we should be taking a role in helping our children to find spouses, godly spouses, because I think most of you would agree, those of you who are married or who have been married, you would agree that our relationship with our spouse is the most important relationship we'll ever have, other than that with God. So that's a very important decision, and it's something that perhaps we can help our children with, actually. So Abraham sends his servant Eliezer to his family area to find a wife for Isaac. And it's interesting to note that Eliezer, we find, is not a follower of God. And so God can use anyone in a situation to be helpful. And we see that Eliezer is not only willing to go, well, he probably has to go, but he is very much thinking about Abraham and Abraham's faith with God, and he actually calls upon the God of Abraham to help him in this quest for the wife. And so he asks for a sign, and it's very interesting. I think sometimes we push forward on something without maybe asking God for a sign, for a confirmation of some sort. And it reminds me of when Baruch and I were in college together. We were in a class and didn't really know each other that well. But we were learning, it was a secular university, but we were learning about David and his first wife, Michal. And this was called Literature of the Bible, Old Testament, but it was in a secular university. So we were learning about her. And as we were almost ready to leave class, Baruch said, just as clear as can be, and those of you who have heard Baruch, you know he is not a touchy-feely person at all, right? He is like, very much so. But he said, just as clear as day, he heard a voice saying, the woman you marry will like the name Michal. And he's like, that is like really bizarre, to just hear that. And so we don't know each other that well, and we're walking out of class, and I turn around to him and I say, Michal, I like that name. And he was so overwhelmed with shock that he went back into the classroom and sat down. And I just went on my merry way, I didn't know anything. But, sometimes God can give us really strong confirmations. We need to be aware of them. We need to be sensitive to that. We need to be, when you're praying for something, you need to also be listening and looking and watching for a response from God. Sometimes we just, think it's going to appear on the front doorstep or it's going to just happen, but he may require some effort on our part as well. So we need to be aware of when we're praying that we also are listening to God and watching for what he wants to show us in that. So we pick up in verse 15 and 16 around in there, and we find Rebecca. And it says in the scripture that she's a na'arah, and a na'arah in Hebrew is like a teenager. So she's around 16 years old or so, something like that. And we find out a lot of information about her as we're reading this, because we find that she's beautiful, and this is a word, the beautiful means she's beautiful inside and out. She's just a very lovely woman. But it's interesting because as we read about her, it does say that, but there's a real emphasis on her behavior. We see that she's watering the animals. She's doing real physical labor, carrying those jugs of water, providing that for all of the animals. And it talks in detail. It uses great adjectives, or adverbs, I guess they would be, for describing how she is doing all these different activities. It says that she's doing them joyfully, quickly. She's doing them thoroughly, and she's really doing this out of a heart to serve, a heart of service. So we see, just even at a young age, she is developing her character in a really godly way. She's not like a lot of teenagers that we think of, focused on the outside and, having fun and things like that. And it talks about how her character, she's become sensitive to the needs of others. She's looking, she's moving, she's helping. And it's really important for us to see that while we're in our day-to-day living, maybe waiting for God to do something, that we're not doing nothing, that we should be developing ourselves, working on our character and growing closer to the Lord. I actually was going to speak about this a little later, but it really applies now, and that is when you look at revelation, there are two types of revelation, and many of you may already know this. There's what's called general revelation, which is what God has given us in his word. It applies to everyone. This is revelation all of us should follow. Then there's specific revelation that's for you and you and you. And that you are not going to receive until you are receiving general the revelation for everyone. So in other words, we need to be in the Word and praying so that God will then direct our next step. There's plenty, I hear so many people saying, I'm sitting here waiting for God to show me what to do. But they're not doing anything in the meantime. They're not developing themselves in any way. They're not in the Word to follow God more closely so that he can then lead them to the next thing, because all of it is preparation. We need to be prepared for what he's going to call us to do. I remember as a little girl in Illinois in the U.S., so for those of you who know anything about that, surrounded by corn, basically, everywhere. And I was so fortunate. I came to the Lord when I was 6 years old. And my mother was very instrumental in that and made sure that I was around really good teaching, for which that was the biggest blessing. But I remember the first Bible verse that I ever memorized when I was 6 years old. And it was not John 3:16, but it was actually Isaiah 6:8. And it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom will I send? Who will go for us?' Then said I, 'Here am I, send me.'" And it's funny because it wasn't until many years later that I saw the application for that in my life. I didn't move to Israel until I was 36. So, that's 30 years later. But there was a lot of preparation in the meantime, moving to different places, having different heartache during the process. All of these things will prepare you for something that you have ahead. I know that right after Baruch and I got married, I suffered 3 miscarriages in a row. And it was not long after that all these different women were coming to me who had had miscarriages. And they didn't even know that I had had 3. And I was able to talk to them and relate to them because I had experienced the same thing. So everything that you go through is for a reason. You can turn it for good. God will be preparing you for the next step. You may not see it way down the road, but he's preparing you for that. And so it's very important to be aware of what's actually going on in your life. I know many times we get going along and, you just live day to day and you're not really absorbing what is going on. How is God going to use this? How can he use me for other people? And that's something that we really need to be aware of. We're all going to have a testimony, whether it's one that we choose or one that we just give. But people are watching us, and they're going to see the good and the bad. And so we need to always be aware of what our testimony is. So anyway, back to Rebecca and Eliezer. So Eliezer comes up and Rebecca offers to water his animals and all of that. And so then he finds out that she's from the same tribe and people as Abraham. And what a testimony this has been for him. And he praises God. So we see that Rebecca, being where she was supposed to be at the time, helped make this whole encounter possible. So being in the right place at the right time, where God wants you to be, will provide the opportunity for you to be blessed by God. God's going to give you blessings here, but if you're not here, you're not receiving the blessings that he has planned for you. So Rebecca, instead of being at home, putting on her makeup or whatever, she's out there watering the animals, serving others, which put her in the position for Eliezer to meet her and for then him to present the proposal to her of what his mission was. And I think it's very important to see that He presents the information to her and her family. And something that a lot of people feel is that women are lesser in the Bible, and especially in the older times and all of that stuff. But I think it's really important to see that Scripture actually lifts women up. If you see a passage of Scripture where women take the forefront, it's a passage about redemption of some sort. And so we see here that in these events, they're talking about if she can go and all of that stuff. But in the end, we see that Rebecca was given the choice whether to go with them or not, with him or not. And Rebecca is the one that said, yes, I'll go. So we see here that she is living in faith. And this is going to be very important later on when we keep reading. So we see that Rebecca is doing what she's supposed to be doing. She encounters Eliezer, who has a mission. She's in the right place at the right time to hear about that and to respond. So everything was being done in accordance with the providence of God, and it all has to do with obedience, being obedient so that you can be in the right place at the right time to receive the blessings from God. Then the next thing that we read, after we see that Rebecca's willing to go and packing all of her stuff together and everything, we shift to Isaac, and it's very interesting. He's out in the field, and the way it describes it, he's gone out in the field, and many Bibles say that he went out to meditate. And the word in Hebrew is lasuach, which means to talk or to converse. And so it's related to prayer. So it's evening time, early evening, and Isaac goes out to pray. And as he's praying, he sees coming towards him the little entourage and that has Eliezer and Rebecca in it. And Rebecca lifts up her eyes and she says, "Who is that?" And Eliezer says that it's Isaac. And the word that is actually used there is that she fell off her camel. So she was, very struck by this, I guess. And then it says that she took her scarf and covered herself. Now, I have a question. Why do you guys think that she did that? Why do you think that she covered herself when she knew that was Isaac who was going to marry her? No. I mean, she would be modest anyway, but this is something further. No, not to, whoever you're going to marry can see your face. Well, with Ruth and Boaz, actually she was covered and then she uncovered her feet. The reason is because I'm not sure that there's a right answer on that, but if we notice, it said that she was very beautiful. She, by faith, sight unseen, is going to marry this man. And this is by faith. She wants him to receive her by faith as well, and not make his decision to marry her based upon her beauty. So, yes, she doesn't want it to just be based upon the physical. We need to remember she's about 16 years old. She's leaving her family, her friends, her country, everything to marry this man that she doesn't know. And so I think that she wants a little bit of faith on his part too, and make sure that, they're going to get married for the right reason. And then something that happens next is very important as well. It's very meaningful. And I think most of you will remember this, where it says that Isaac took Rebekah into Sarah, his mother's tent, and she became his wife. And I love it. This is the only place in the Bible where it says that the man loved his wife. So we're told that Isaac loved his wife and that he was comforted. And so this is really a portrayal of the ending of one generation and looking forward to the future. And we find quite frequently in the Bible we have what's called dorve dor, generation to generation. And looking forward is always no, I can't think of the word. Not example. It's a foretelling of the future, of the revelation of God. Now, I want to take just a little side skew over, and now that Isaac and Rebekah have just gotten married, I'm just going to take a couple minutes to talk about marriage. The Bible has a lot to say about marriage, and it's not always things that we like to hear, but I think a lot of times maybe it's misunderstood. So first of all, I want to know how many of you have seen any of my videos on my YouTube channel, Biblically Inspired Life. Just a few. Okay. I have a YouTube channel, Biblically Inspired Life. And if you go on there, there are some videos that Baruch and I have done together on marriage. And I will say we have a lot of fun doing those. I wish I could put together all the outtakes. Oh, it would be hilarious. They are funny. But anyway, so I don't want to get into the whole long thing today about submission, okay? So that's a whole other topic. But I do have some videos on there about the role of the husband and the role of the wife. And so you might want to take a look on there just to get a little more background. But, something that's very important and we may not think about, I'm going to read this in Titus chapter 2. Titus chapter 2 says in verse 5, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. I think that that's really important. We are a witness, we're a testimony, and how we behave towards our husbands and towards each other is our testimony. That's part of our testimony. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and read verses 3 and 4 as well. The aged women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children. So we have a huge responsibility, which then will be our testimony to others. And I think it's important for us to realize that in a marriage, if everybody's just doing the same thing, there's going to be a lot of things that don't get done. So a marriage, women are equal, totally equal to men, but we have different roles. And it's very important for us to do our roles, which will encourage our husbands to do their roles. And our attitudes within our marriage is very important. We see in Proverbs 21 about it's better to live with a leaking roof than a woman who's, annoying. And really, it's great to work as a team, isn't it? To just see that your marriage together, it's a journey together where you're a team. You always have someone there with you. You have someone fighting with you, not alongside you, not with you. And it's important for us to really encourage our husbands with that. I was speaking with someone recently who's married to a non-believer, and he was not, I think he was angry about her decision to follow the Lord and was making it difficult for her. And it becomes a real struggle. And she was reading in the Bible and said, oh, my behavior can have an impact in his spiritual life. So if you look at, I didn't put it down. Anyway, it's in 1 Peter, but that how we behave those who are married to non-believers may draw him to the Lord. So we need to not be combative with our husbands. We need to see our husbands as our friend. We need to be their cheerleader. And let me tell you something about guys, and I know that you know this probably, but a lot of them are really basic people. They're not as complicated as we are many times. I know you've probably seen the thing where the guy, he has compartments in his brain and nothing touches each other, whereas ours, are all intertwined. Baruch will say something that reminds me of something from 20 years ago, and then I get mad at him. And he doesn't understand that brought up this emotion, which brought up that thought from 20 years ago, and now I'm mad. But men aren't like that. They're much more compartmentalized. And if we are encouraging to them, loving to them, they respond. They are not necessarily, they don't have this emotional background of baggage that we do. Yeah, you're nice to me now, but 22 years ago, I remember, when you said that. So we need to remember that we have a lot of power, and we need to use it properly, not to abuse that power, but use it in a godly way to lift our husbands up. Because as you lift your husband up, he's going to pull you up alongside him. He wants to be your teammate, your lover, your husband, your partner, your companion, all of these things to grow your marriages. And for those of you who are married, I would also recommend really spending time together. Set aside a time every day that you can reconnect. If it's at the end of the day, how was your day? Sit and we personally, we sit down every night and have tea together for about an hour and talk. And one night we were getting ready for bed and Baruch said, we didn't do tea today. And I said, oh yeah, all right. So we went and had tea and it was midnight, but we had tea anyway. And it's just really important. Nothing can take the place of that. And we see in Isaac and Rebekah's relationship, if you remember later on in the story, do you remember that there was, I think it was a king or something, and they had said they were brother and sister or something like that. And he saw them, and it said that they were playing together in a way that he knew that they weren't brother and sister. And it's really important to realize that that is a unique relationship that you don't have with anyone else ever. So I would encourage you to just take another look at your husband and see his good qualities, encourage him in those good qualities, and it will bring you up as well. So I really want to encourage you with that. And also, the last thing on that is that we are not responsible for other people's behavior, other people's responses, but we're responsible for our behavior. And if we do have spouses that are not following the Lord, that does not release us from our responsibility to be a godly wife. So I just want to encourage everyone in this, because this relationship is more important than any other than your relationship with the Lord. And it will affect your relationship with the Lord. I know it says for men to treat their wives right, so that their prayers are not hindered. So this is a very important relationship. And for us, sometimes we just have to realize that it's not all about us, that, it's about the relationship. And the last thing I'm going to say about that, first of all, that was 1 Peter 3:1 about the non-believers. But the last thing I just want to say is, over the years, Brooke and I have been married 35 years, there's been times when I'm just like, he's just making me miserable. I am just so mad and, whatever. And then the Lord just said to me, well, are you making him happy? And it's just, I never thought about that, But it's important to realize that for those of us who are in a relationship that, a marriage that is going to be the one and only in our life, rather than sitting and wallowing in some things that you're unhappy about, you need to work on it. You need to build each other up. And like I said, I truly believe that the men will respond to our positive behavior. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the book, The Total Woman. No, you'd have to be old to know that. And but anyway, it was a very popular book in the U.S. in the 70s. So yeah, I was a little girl when it came out. And it was really about this, about how without being manipulative, I don't want any of us to be manipulative, but just how our behavior can impact the response that we will get from our husbands. And it was sold like 5 million copies or something. But anyway, and the woman who wrote it is a friend of ours now. But so anyway, I just wanted to encourage everyone in their marriages. I need to move along because, yeah. All right. So the next thing I wanted to see, us to see, is we're going to jump down to Genesis 25. Rebecca, now as a mother. So I'm going to do mother and kind of a role in redemption together on this. We see that she was barren. Isaac prayed for her, and she became pregnant. And it's very interesting. In verse 23, it says, "And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger." So first of all, I know most of you have maybe heard Baruch say that women are spiritually more sensitive and spiritually more advanced, we'll say, than men in a general sense. But it's very interesting that God told Rebekah and not Isaac about this. This is a prophecy for the future of her children, and God told her, not Isaac. And later on we see why, because it says, do you remember how it says that Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob? And what did Isaac love about Esau? Do you remember? He enjoyed his food. The physical, right? He based everything on the physical, whereas Rebekah was basing things on the spiritual. So we can see also that Rebekah remembered what God had said to her, that the older will serve the younger. So she knew what the plan was for the future. And we can see that she was concerned about that. So and we see over and over in her life, like I was saying, about faith. And she's doing, everything that she's doing is by faith. in the promises of God. And we see that when she is learning about the future for her children, that she remembers that. And we see that later, that why everything went the way it did. And I know those of you who were at the conference heard in great detail about that, so I'm not going to go into all of that today. But getting the birthright and the blessing, and that going to Jacob as opposed to Esau, and why that was important. So we need to remember that if we will humble ourselves and recognize God's authority and obey his word, that we can be instruments of God's glory. So Rebecca, by hearing what God said to her, remembering what he said to her, realizing the importance of that for future generations, she made sure that the birthright and the blessing went to Jacob as opposed to Esau. So remembering what God's plans are, purposes are, and wanting to be an active participant in them is what we should be about.